The evening was calm, the kind of quiet that made the small town feel even smaller. Streetlights glowed softly over the empty road, and Officer Daniel drove at his usual slow pace, eyes moving from one side of the street to the other. He had worked this route for years and could almost predict every car that passed by. Most nights felt the same, simple and uneventful. But on this night, something small caught his attention, a silver sedan moving a little faster than it should. He watched it for a few seconds, noticing the slight speed difference. It wasn't anything dramatic, but enough to follow. Daniel signaled and pulled behind the car. The driver didn't try to escape or act restless. Instead, the car gently eased toward the side of the road, as if the driver expected this to happen. Daniel stepped out of his patrol car and walked toward the sedan. The cool air brushed across his face and he exhaled slowly, preparing for another routine stop. When he reached the window, the driver rolled it down without hesitation. The man inside looked calm, almost too calm, with a polite expression that felt practiced. "Good evening," Daniel said. "Do you know why I stopped you?" The man nodded lightly. "I believe I may have been going a bit over the limit." His voice was steady, deep, and controlled. Daniel asked for his license and registration. The driver handed them over quickly, like he had done this many times before. Everything about him seemed neat. His clothes, his posture, even the way he spoke. Daniel noticed it, but didn't think much of it. He walked back to his patrol car and began checking the documents. The system showed no issues. No warnings, no past problems, nothing at all. It was clean. Almost too clean. As he typed, he couldn't shake the sense that something about this man was different. Not dangerous, just different. When he returned to the car window, he asked the driver a few more questions. "Are you from around here?" "No, just passing through," the man replied. Again, calm, polite, controlled. Daniel felt a small tug of curiosity. He wasn't suspicious in a fearful way, but he wanted to make sure everything was right. These were the kind of stops where officers had to rely on instinct. Even if nothing obvious seemed wrong, he explained to the driver that he needed a moment and asked him to step out of the car. The man didn't argue. He simply opened the door, stepped out. He stood quietly by the side of the road. The road hummed softly as a few cars passed by at a distance. Daniel radioed for backup, not because he felt unsafe, but because procedure required it for situations that felt unusual. And something about this man felt unusual. While they waited, Daniel tried to start simple conversation, just to get a sense of who this man was. "Long drive ahead?" he asked. "Not too long," the man said. "Just heading to meet someone for the evening," Daniel nodded. The man didn't offer extra information, didn't ramble, didn't avoid eye contact. He behaved like someone who had been through official interactions many times. A few minutes later, another patrol car arrived. Officer Ramos stepped out, giving a small nod. He approached calmly and stood beside Daniel. "I'm just assisting on a routine check," Daniel said. Ramos understood. They asked the man a few safety questions, the same ones used in every stop. He answered each one clearly. There was no sign of stress, anxiety, or confusion. If anything, the man seemed like he knew exactly what would happen next. Daniel asked if he could do a quick check for safety. The man agreed without a single complaint. His reaction was surprising, not defensive, not annoyed, just accepting. Most people showed at least a little frustration, especially during long stops. As they waited for final confirmation on his background, Daniel kept observing him. The man's eyes didn't wander. His hands stayed relaxed. His breathing was steady. He looked like someone trained to stay calm. Daniel tried to push the thought aside. Maybe he was a teacher, a lawyer, or someone used to professional environments. Not everyone who behaved calmly had a secret to hide. Still, the feeling lingered. A small breeze moved across the road, and the man's jacket shifted slightly. Daniel noticed a faint outline inside the jacket pocket. Not dangerous, just something shaped like a card holder, stiff and solid. Many people carried card holders, he told himself. It was nothing strange, but his instincts kept nudging him, reminding him that small details sometimes meant more than they appeared. The man didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't look irritated with the wait. If anything, he seemed familiar with the entire process, like he had stood on the other side of these interactions many times. Daniel stepped aside and spoke softly to Ramos. He's calm. To calm? You feel it? Ramos nodded gently. Yeah, he's not nervous at all. They weren't looking for trouble. They weren't trying to accuse him of anything. They just sensed something they couldn't quite identify. Daniel approached the man again. We're almost done. Thank you for cooperating. Of course, the man replied. There was no emotion in his voice, no annoyance, no fear, no hurry. Just steady composure. Daniel glanced at him once more, noticing how he stood slightly straighter than most people did. His shoes were clean, polished. His clothes were simple, but tidy. His manner was respectful, yet firm, as he looked at him. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a regular person driving through town. There was something structured about him, something official, but he still didn't know what. Minutes passed quietly, and the night felt still again. Daniel looked at the road, then at the man, wondering how a simple traffic stop could suddenly feel like something bigger. He didn't know yet that everything was about to change. He didn't know that the moment the man's real identity came to light, the entire tone of the night would shift instantly. But for now, it was just a calm evening, a routine stop, and a driver who seemed more prepared for questions than any regular driver should be. And Daniel had no idea how close he was to discovering who he was really talking to. The night air was quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic echoing along the deserted road. Officer Daniel stood beside the silver sedan, his flashlight swinging lightly in his hand, its beam glinting off the polished hood. The driver remained calm, hands resting gently at his sides, almost like he was expecting every step that was happening. Backup had arrived now. Officer Ramos, standing a few feet behind, scanning the area. Daniel tried to focus on the standard procedures, verifying identity, checking for outstanding warrants, making sure there were no hidden dangers. Everything seemed routine, but the man's behavior was anything but ordinary. Sir, Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady, we just need to complete a few more checks. I hope you don't mind waiting a moment. Of course, the man replied, voice low and calm. He didn't fidget, didn't glance around, didn't show the slightest irritation. That stillness made Daniel even more alert. Most people got anxious after 10 minutes, shifting from foot to foot or fidgeting with their hands. Not him. Daniel asked Ramos to assist with a safety check, a routine procedure whenever something felt slightly off. They were not accusing the man of anything, just following protocol. The driver stepped back politely, giving them space, yet his calmness made Daniel uneasy. He had been in traffic stops before, but this composure was unusual. They asked the man to remove his jacket so they could check the pockets safely. He did so carefully, folding it neatly over his arm. His movements were precise, intentional. There was no sudden motion, no nervous twitch, nothing that would suggest he was hiding anything dangerous. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was hidden beneath that calm exterior. Do you carry any weapons, sir? Daniel asked. No, officer, the man answered simply. Nothing of that sort. Daniel nodded, observing him closely. He wanted to make sure the man was telling the truth, but the certainty in his voice gave no hint of deception. It was clear he was used to authority, used to being in situations where he had to maintain control. The officers went through the routine questions again, just to make sure they hadn't missed anything. Where were you coming from? Where were you going? Were there any passengers? The man answered each clearly, never hesitating, never adding unnecessary words, yet never seeming rude. He spoke with a rhythm and precision that was almost hypnotic in its steadiness. As Daniel checked the documents again, his instincts screamed that this was not an ordinary person. There was a subtle authority in the way he held himself, a confidence that wasn't arrogance but experience. It was something Daniel had seen before in senior law enforcement officers and military personnel. Ramos leaned closer and whispered, He doesn't act like a normal driver. Something's off. Daniel nodded slightly. He had the same feeling. It wasn't that the man was threatening, but there was a weight to him, a sense that he belonged in a position of responsibility far beyond a normal citizen. They finished the safety sweep and confirmed there were no items of concern. Daniel relaxed slightly, but didn't stop observing. Even in routine traffic stops, officers had to trust their instincts. Something about the driver's poise and composure kept Daniel alert. "Sir," Daniel said, "we just need one more moment to verify everything fully." "Take your time," the man replied. There was patience in his tone, a patience that came from experience, not ignorance. He understood procedure, understood the steps, and didn't feel threatened or impatient. As they waited for the background check to finalize, Daniel found himself studying the man. His hands were clean and steady, nails neatly trimmed. His eyes were clear, direct, and focused. His posture was straight but relaxed. Every detail seemed intentional, a sign of discipline and training. Daniel realized he had seen this kind of composure before in his career, but only in people who had been through high-pressure situations. Military officers, senior law enforcement agents, people who had to maintain calm in tense moments. Ramos glanced at him, reading the same signs. "Yeah, you're right. This guy's different." To calm for a routine stop, Daniel agreed silently, trying to remain professional. They had no right to assume anything based on composure alone, yet it was hard not to notice. It was a subtle kind of respect, the kind that came naturally when faced with someone who clearly knew his way around authority. Minutes passed. The background check was still processing. The driver stood quietly, his face showing nothing. Yet Daniel felt that there was more beneath the surface than met the eye. Every so often, he glanced toward the driver. Wondering about the person behind that calm exterior, Daniel asked casually, "Do you travel often for work?" "Occasionally," the man replied. "I have responsibilities that take me to different places. Nothing unusual." Daniel nodded, unsure whether the answer was true or if he was only hearing part of the story. But there was no hint of deception in his voice. It was clear that he was honest about what he revealed. But Daniel sensed layers beneath, experiences the man wasn't sharing. Ramos broke the silence. "He's handling this better than most people would. Even seasoned drivers get nervous during stops." Daniel exhaled, watching the subtle movements of the man's hands. They were calm, relaxed, folded loosely behind his back now. It was almost as if he was teaching the officers patience simply by standing there quietly. Finally, the background system pinged. Daniel and Ramos approached, checking the final information. The man's name appeared, and with it, a title that made Daniel freeze for a second. It didn't make sense at first. The name was accompanied by a designation that confirmed the feeling Daniel had been struggling to understand all along. This wasn't just any driver. Daniel's eyes widened slightly as he took a step back. He tried to maintain professionalism, but the recognition began to sink in. This calm, composed, authoritative presence wasn't coincidental. It was who he was. Ramos leaned in, catching the subtle change in Daniel's expression. "Wait, is that?" Daniel nodded slowly, confirming what they both suspected. The man they had stopped was no ordinary citizen. He carried an aura of authority that was more than experience, it was responsibility, rank, and power. The quiet road now felt different. The weight of the revelation hung in the air. What had started as a routine traffic stop had shifted into something entirely unexpected. A moment where the ordinary collided with the extraordinary. Daniel's mind raced as he tried to prepare for the next steps. Realizing that every decision from this point would carry more weight than usual, the man remained patient, unaware of the internal realization taking place beside him. To him, it was just a routine procedure, the way it had always been. And Daniel couldn't help but admire the discipline it took to maintain such calmness in any situation. And as the night continued, Daniel understood one simple truth. This stop was no longer routine. It was becoming a lesson in patience, composure, and the sudden recognition that appearances often hid the most extraordinary realities. The night had grown deeper, and the quiet street seemed even quieter, almost holding its breath. Officer Daniel glanced at his backup, Ramos, and then back at the man standing calmly by the silver sedan. For a moment, it was as if time slowed down. Everything they had thought about routine traffic stops was being challenged by this single presence. Daniel stepped forward, trying to maintain his professional composure. He spoke carefully, "Sir. We've completed the preliminary checks, but we still need to ensure everything is clear. I'm going to ask you to cooperate with a final body check, just for safety." The man nodded. His eyes showed no hesitation, no irritation, only understanding. "I understand, officer. Please proceed." Daniel signaled to Ramos, who moved closer, and together they began the routine procedure. The man remained patient, placing his hands behind his back, standing perfectly still. It wasn't stiffness. It was deliberate, disciplined stillness. It's the kind Daniel had only seen in highly trained personnel. As Daniel reached for the man's identification again, something caught his eye. The card holder inside the man's jacket glimmered faintly under the flashlight. He felt a flicker of curiosity, wondering what credentials could warrant such calm confidence in a traffic stop. His fingers trembled slightly with anticipation. But he hid it well. When the ID was finally in his hand, Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The letters and numbers, the designation on the card, it was official, unmistakable. This wasn't just any driver. The man was an FBI captain. The words seemed to leap off the card. Daniel felt a mixture of awe and disbelief. He looked up at the man, who was still composed, almost serene. There was no reaction in his face, no sign that he knew the power of the moment. He remained polite, steady, and calm. Daniel struggled to find words to explain the shock. But the silence was more powerful than anything he could say. Ramos leaned closer, his eyes wide. "You're not going to believe this," he whispered, glancing at the ID. He's an FBI captain." Daniel nodded slowly, trying to process the sudden revelation. The man standing in front of him, one who had remained calm and collected throughout the entire stop, was someone whose authority far exceeded their own. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling to realize the ordinary. Routine had turned into an encounter with someone at a very high level of law enforcement. The man handed the card back with a gentle, respectful gesture. "I apologize if this has caused any concern," he said. His voice remained steady, polite, almost measured. As if aware of the officer's reaction but not wanting to make the moment uncomfortable, Daniel's mind raced. The usual tension of a traffic stop had shifted into something entirely different: respect, surprise, and an unspoken acknowledgement of the man's position. Every detail now felt heightened. The quiet street, the hum of distant traffic, the way the man stood, the disciplined calm in his posture. "Sir, thank you for cooperating," Daniel finally managed, his voice a mix of professionalism and genuine awe. We weren't expecting." "It's all right," the man interrupted gently. "I understand procedure. Even off duty, I respect the rules." Daniel exhaled slowly, realizing he was witnessing someone who embodied the balance between authority and humility. It was a rare combination, the kind that commanded respect without demanding it. Every movement, every word from this man conveyed experience and composure honed over years of responsibility. Ramos cleared his throat, still staring at the man with wide eyes. "This is unbelievable. I can't imagine how often you get stopped like this." The man chuckled softly, a quiet, low sound. "Not often, I assure you. Most people don't realize the importance of staying calm in unexpected situations. That's part of our training." Daniel felt a wave of understanding wash over him. It wasn't arrogance in the man's tone. It was the quiet confidence that came from knowing you were trained, experienced, and capable. It was the kind of calmness that turned a tense situation into something manageable. The officers completed the final safety check, which now felt almost ceremonial in its importance. Every step that had seemed ordinary just minutes ago had taken on a new weight. The night air, the quiet street, the distant sounds of passing cars, all of it seemed to underscore the extraordinary nature of what was happening. Daniel found himself studying the man again. He noticed small details he hadn't before: the neatness of his clothes, the polished shoes, the careful way he carried himself. It wasn't about appearance alone. It was the discipline, the careful attention to detail that came from years of experience in situations where composure mattered. The man's demeanor hadn't changed. He remained polite, respectful, and calm, as if aware of the significance of the moment, but choosing not to make it awkward. Daniel realized that this was the hallmark of true professionalism, the ability to remain grounded, to act with humility, even when holding a position of immense responsibility. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "I want to thank you for your patience and cooperation. This has been enlightening." The man gave a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement. "It's my responsibility to set a good example, whether on duty or off. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly and professionally." Daniel felt a deep respect for the man. What had started as a routine stop had become a lesson in humility, composure, and human decency. He realized that assumptions about people could often be wrong, that appearances could hide extraordinary capabilities, and that patience and professionalism mattered more than any authority card. Ramos, too, seemed affected by the encounter. The surprise and respect were evident in his posture and expression. Both officers had learned something important. The unexpected could happen at any moment. Staying calm and professional was always essential. As the man finally prepared to leave, Daniel stepped back, watching him carefully. The silver sedan glinted under the streetlights, a symbol of a moment that had begun as ordinary, but had turned into something remarkable. Daniel knew he would remember this stop for a long time, not just because of who the man was, but because of what the encounter had taught him about composure, respect, and humility. The man waved briefly, smiled politely, and got into his car. As the sedan pulled back onto the road and disappeared into the night, Daniel felt a mix of relief and admiration. What had started as a normal evening had turned into an unforgettable experience, one that would remind him of the unpredictable nature of life and the extraordinary people he might encounter along the way. The road returned to its calm, quiet state, but Daniel and Ramos remained for a moment, processing what had just happened. It was a night that began like any other, but ended with a profound reminder. People were often more than they appeared, and sometimes ordinary routines could reveal extraordinary truths. The street felt calm once more, but the atmosphere had shifted. Officer Daniel leaned against his patrol car, taking a deep breath, while Ramos checked his notes. The silver sedan had driven away, leaving an unusual stillness behind. The encounter was over, yet its impact lingered like a quiet echo. Daniel couldn't help but replay the moments in his mind. Every second of the stop, every calm word, and every measured movement from the man had stood out. What had begun as a routine evening patrol had turned into a lesson in humility and respect. He realized that the man's professionalism had not only revealed his identity, but it also reflected a sense of responsibility that Daniel admired deeply. Ramos broke the silence. "I still can't believe he handled that like it was nothing. Most people would be upset, nervous, or defensive. He just stayed calm the whole time." Daniel nodded, recalling how precise every action had been. "It's remarkable, isn't it? That calm, the patience. It's something you can't learn overnight. It's earned through experience." They began discussing the stop, dissecting each moment. The man's tone, his composure, and the way he followed instructions without complaint had made a lasting impression. Daniel realized that beyond his position as an FBI captain, this man embodied values that every officer could learn from: patience, respect, and humility. The two officers reflected on how his elite assumptions could mislead people. Initially, Daniel had sensed something unusual, but he had no idea who the man truly was. They had treated the situation with caution, following protocol as they always did. And yet, even with all their training, they had been taken aback by the revelation. It was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that everyone deserved to be treated professionally until proven otherwise. Daniel thought about the interaction from a human perspective. The man hadn't acted superior or condescending, despite his high rank. He didn't assert authority unnecessarily. He respected the officer's role and procedures, showing that real power often comes with humility. This was a lesson Daniel wanted to carry forward, not just in his work, but in life. Ramos glanced at him, seeing the same reflection in Daniel's eyes. "You know, it's easy to forget that these people are human too. We see their positions and titles and assume things, but moments like this remind us that anyone, even someone high up, can be approachable, respectful, and patient. Daniel agreed. Exactly. It's about character, not just rank. He showed patience when it wasn't required, respect when he could have skipped it, and professionalism, even off duty. That's the kind of example that sticks with you. The night went on, and the officers resumed their patrol. Yet, the memory of the stop lingered. Daniel found himself paying more attention to the small details of human behavior, how people reacted under stress, how they communicated without words, how patience could transform tension into understanding. He remembered the driver's calm eyes, steady breathing, and quiet confidence. Those were the traits that had turned an ordinary moment into something extraordinary. It wasn't the badge or the title that had made the encounter impactful, it was the man himself. Daniel also reflected on the importance of procedure. Despite the initial surprise and awe, every step they took during the stop had been necessary and correct. Protocol had kept everyone safe, maintained respect, and allowed the revelation to unfold naturally. It reminded him that structure and rules were important, but the way people approached situations made the difference. As they drove through the quiet streets, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter had reminded him why he became a police officer: to serve, to protect, and to maintain fairness, even in moments that seemed ordinary. The FBI captain's calm had been a silent lesson. True professionalism often speaks louder than words. Ramos broke the thoughtful silence again. I'm going to remember this stop for a long time. It's a reminder that every interaction counts, no matter how small it seems at the time. Daniel smiled slightly. And it shows that humility and patience can leave an impression stronger than any badge or title. It's not just about who you are on paper. It's how you act when people are watching, or even when they aren't. The patrol continued through the neighborhood, the soft glow of streetlights guiding their way. Each passing car reminded Daniel that life was full of ordinary moments, each carrying the potential to reveal something extraordinary if approached with respect and patience. The encounter had taught him that extraordinary lessons often came in unexpected ways. Daniel glanced at Ramos. I think this stop will change the way I see traffic stops forever. I'll treat every driver as a person, not just a case. That calm, that composure, it's something I want to emulate. Ramos nodded. Me too. It's a rare thing to see someone handle authority with such humility. And it's a lesson we can take with us every day. As the night wore on, the officers returned to their routine patrol, but something fundamental had shifted. The world felt a little different, richer, filled with the reminder that extraordinary people were often found in ordinary places. That lessons could come when least expected, and that humility and respect could leave a lasting impact. The quiet streets seemed to echo their thoughts, carrying the lesson forward. Every person they encountered after that night would be seen with a touch more understanding, a little more patience, and an awareness that calmness and professionalism often reveal the true measure of a person. By the time the patrol ended, Daniel and Ramos had shared their reflections and quietly acknowledged the impact of the encounter. They both knew that this night, which had started like any other, had become unforgettable. It wasn't just the surprise of discovering the driver's true identity, it was the humanity, composure, and humility he had shown that would remain in their minds for years to come as they returned to the station. Daniel realized that extraordinary moments didn't always come with fireworks or dramatic events. Sometimes they came quietly, in the form of a single encounter, a calm demeanor, and the reminder that patience and respect could transform even the simplest interactions into lessons worth. Remembering the dawn had not yet arrived, and the sky carried a deep shade of blue, holding the quiet promise of a new day. Officer Daniel sat in his patrol car, reflecting on the night that had passed. It was a night that started as ordinary as any other, but had turned into a lesson he would carry for the rest of his career. The encounter with the FBI captain had left a mark. Daniel realized that for hours after the stop, he had replayed every detail: the calm voice, the disciplined posture, the polite compliance with every procedure. He understood now that professionalism was more than following rules. It was an attitude, a mindset, a way of treating others with respect regardless of the situation. Ramos joined him in the car, thoughtful expression on his face. I keep thinking about how patient he was. It's not something you see every day. Most people would have been frustrated, angry, or defensive. He just stayed composed. Daniel nodded. That composure is what struck me the most. It wasn't arrogance or superiority. It was experience and humility combined. And it changed the way I think about these stops. They drove through the quiet streets, both lost in thought. The night had shown them that even the simplest interactions could reveal extraordinary lessons about people, character, and human nature. Daniel realized that the calm authority of the FBI captain was a reminder that real strength didn't need to be loud or aggressive. It could be quiet, steady, and patient. As the car glided past the familiar neighborhood, Daniel thought about the small, human moments in the stop, the polite exchange of words, the patient waiting, the mutual respect between strangers. He realized that these moments, though brief, could leave lasting impressions. The night had turned into a quiet reflection on respect, humility, and professionalism. Ramos glanced at him. It's strange, isn't it? How one routine stop can teach you so much. I feel like I've learned more tonight than in months of regular patrols. Daniel smiled, feeling the same way. It's a reminder that every person has a story, every moment has meaning, and every interaction matters. We never know who we're dealing with, but we can always choose to be professional, respectful, and patient. That's what makes the difference. The two officers continued their patrol, now seeing their surroundings with fresh eyes. Every passing car, every pedestrian, every small detail seemed to carry a new significance. Daniel realized that the night had changed him not just as an officer, but as a person who interacted with others every day. He remembered the quiet nods, the respectful gestures, the measured words of the captain. It was a demonstration of how authority could coexist with humility, how power could be exercised without intimidation, and how patience could turn tension into understanding. Daniel reflected on his own career and the countless steps he had made. He realized that sometimes he might have judged too quickly, assumed too much, or overlooked the human element. The night had reminded him to slow down, observe carefully, and treat everyone with fairness and respect, regardless of appearances. Ramos spoke again, breaking the reflective silence. I think we both learned a lot about ourselves tonight. About patience, about respect, and about humility. Daniel nodded in agreement. And about noticing the small things. The way someone carries themselves, how they respond under pressure, the quiet strength in their actions. These things tell you more than words ever could. As the patrol ended, the first hints of sunlight began to touch the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The quiet of the early morning brought a sense of closure to the night. Daniel felt a sense of gratitude for the unexpected lesson, for the reminder that even ordinary moments could carry extraordinary meaning. Before heading back to the station, Daniel and Ramos took a moment to appreciate the calm streets and the new day beginning. They understood that encounters like this were rare, but when they happened, they left a lasting impact. It wasn't just about law enforcement. It was about humanity, respect, and the power of composure. Daniel thought one last time about the FBI captain, about the calm, authority, and humility that had transformed a simple traffic stop into an unforgettable experience. It was a story he would share, not just with fellow officers, but as a personal reminder of what it meant to approach every interaction with patience, respect, and professionalism. As the sun rose, casting light over the town, Daniel started the engine and drove toward the station. The night was behind him, but the lessons remained. The encounter had taught him that ordinary moments could be extraordinary, that people often carried hidden depths, and that humility and calmness could leave impressions far stronger than any badge or title. Ramos looked over, a faint smile on his face. We'll remember this one for a long time. Daniel nodded, eyes on the road. Yes, we will. And we'll carry it forward in every stop, every interaction, every day. The patrol ended, the night fully giving way to day. And the lesson remained clear. Extraordinary moments often arise in the simplest of circumstances, and the true measure of a person lies not in their title, but in their character and actions. Daniel knew he would never forget the calm, steady presence of the FBI captain who had turned a routine stop into a lesson that went far beyond the law. It was a reminder that respect, patience, and humility were timeless virtues, and that sometimes life's most meaningful lessons came quietly, in moments that seemed ordinary at first but became extraordinary in their impact.